Hello, I'm Trace Haythorn, Executive Director for ACPE. I'm here with Richard Thorne. We'd love to talk with you a little bit about interview questions that you may want to ask, but some questions in particular that you shouldn't ask. And we'll talk through a few examples and hopefully have some resources for you by the time we're done. So this is not intended to be exhaustive, nor will this be reviewed by legal counsel. This is really intended to be just some suggestions to help you as you think about your process of recruiting both staff and students for your programs around the country. So welcome, Richard. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. As all of us know and have probably experienced from both sides of the desk, interviewing typically plays a very significant and cornerstone role in selecting students and employees to join our CPE programs and spiritual care departments. One of the things that you may consider doing is using behaviorally based interview questions, which gives people more of a chance to really describe sort of what it is they've done. And in any case, always keep questions open-ended.
Tell me a little bit, give me an example of a behaviorally based question.
Sure. Well, so for example, if I were interviewing someone for a staff chaplain's role, I might ask them, what's the most challenging circumstance that you've ever been part of in your role as a staff chaplain or as a student looking to become a staff chaplain?
Okay, great, thank you.
And again, really looking for a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, sure.
You also really want, as you think about interviewing, to really look at and design questions that really get to the behaviors and the skills and the experiences that someone needs to excel in the role that you're considering them for, the position that you're wanting to fill. One of the ways to do that, taking from Stephen Covey, is to begin with the end in mind. So really taking time to sort of vision what is maybe not perfect, but what does the ideal candidate look like? What are their attributes? What kind of experiences have they had? Where may they have areas that need learning and further development that I feel I have the skills to help support them in? And just getting real clear on that. And just because we've done it before doesn't mean it's the same the next time around. Things are always changing, so maybe the culture's changed a little bit. Maybe there's a new manager on a unit that has a different approach. And it's like, okay, so what do I need now to better fit that situation?
Yeah.
And then really begin to design the questions and the process around that. Another thing to keep in mind with that is you kind of look and go, okay, if I have this ideal, where do I go from there? Is to also ask yourself, where and how far am I willing to compromise that ideal? And even a little different question, but similar, how hard am I willing to work? How big a challenge in students do I want to take on? And be realistic. Somehow don't feel like you need to save the world or something.
Well, and I can say from my chair, a number of the ethics complaints I get come from situations where a supervisor has brought in a student knowing that they may be particularly difficult, but they needed that third person to be able to make a group. In those circumstances, I hope people will call us and ask for alternatives rather than feeling like they've got to compromise just to be able to fill out the numbers of what makes a group. There are a lot of other ways to do this, including partnering with other programs, especially in this age of digital technology. There are a lot of ways to make it work, so people shouldn't feel stuck.
So you kind of have your ideal defined. You've got your questions formed, and you're really ready to begin moving forward. And so in developing those questions, if you keep them focused on the job versus the person, much more likely for you to stay out of harm's way. So really focusing again on what are the strengths, the skills, the kinds of experiences and accomplishments that I'm looking to hear from people as I consider them for a position. And it's not often so much what we ask as how we ask it. And theoretically, what we're asking isn't illegal. It's how we use what's asked. So by not asking it, we stay away from that appearance that, oh, we may be using this, because otherwise it's like, okay, after the fact, prove to me that you weren't.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, good luck with that one.
Yeah, yeah, there's too much in this litigious culture that we're in, and with the history of our country, people have too often used categories to discriminate against folks, and we want to be careful not to use any of those categories to do precisely that, or to be accused of doing that.
And so just as a reminder from our friends in government, the things that to keep in mind that can put us in those kinds of predicaments would be age, race, ethnicity, color, gender, sex, genetic information, countries of origin and nationality, religion, disability, marital or family status, and pregnancy.
So the religion piece is particularly interesting with this nature of this work, because we assume, I think, that everybody has some sort of faith orientation when they come into it. What do we do with that? How would we respond to that? And I think the number of programs that are using autobiographies often will get that out of an autobiography. People would be able to present that right up in front. So it wouldn't necessarily require a direct question. There may be some other strategies too that people might want to use. Correct.
Yeah, and one of the things, if it is something you want to get into with someone, better done after an offer is made, and typically offers are made conditionally, whether it's going through a physical or a background check or whatever it may be. It can be part of that structure at that time.
Okay.
And that just kind of removes it a little bit from the selection process. The other thing is that sometimes some of these things can come up inadvertently. As a good interviewer, you create a relaxed environment. You want people to openly share. And if somebody sort of volunteers something that you go, wait a minute, I think that falls into one of these categories, you pretty much want to ignore it and just move on and ask the next job interview question, the next job related question, as though that statement was never made.
Yeah, and one of the questions I've heard used, which invites precisely that kind of openness, is just tell me what brought you to this chair today. Tell me your journey, how you got to this place. Often folks at that point will tell you a whole lot of things that you can't ask directly, but they will share. The hard part is in those situations, you can't do follow-up questions. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like you have to pretend that you never heard it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and some of the kinds of things then, well, a couple of things really to keep in mind, pretty simple really, as we look at interviewing, is to potentially ask the same questions and take everyone that you're considering for a particular situation through the same process. Yeah. So again, it's not like you met this person or had this conversation, but we all pretty much did exactly the same thing. And likewise, in asking the same questions, keep them job related versus person related. So really keeping those couple of things in mind, if you do that, you're pretty much there.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of the kinds of things sometimes that we could ask, and this is one that could kind of come up informally, because someone may see a picture on your desk or something like that and go, oh, is that your family? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden we can lead to one of those informal conversations, and before you know it, you're going, oh, do you have kids? And how old are they? Not so much. It's easy to have it come up in small talk, but if that subject is brought up, you really want to just move on again to whatever that next job-related question is, and go from there. Now, sometimes something that we may actually want to know about, because again, if you look and go, do I need to know that to make a decision? The answer is no. Mm-hmm. What I may need to know is what your availability is. Mm-hmm. And so that would be a different kind of question describing, we have a pretty rigid structure. Everybody takes call every other weekend, whatever it is. How does that fit into your schedule? Will that work for your schedule? And that's a different kind of thing, because that's very much job related.
It was interesting because one of the conversations I had with one of the HR folks that we spoke with prior to today, they really encouraged us to think about this in some ways the way that a university or a college would think about admitting a student. So when you're thinking about CPE programs, you're thinking about hiring, but you're also thinking about admitting. And so to almost treat it like two different interview processes, that you do a hire process, that you bring that to a clear and concrete close, and then you enter into an admitting process, which is where you would ask for things like the autobiography of the student and those sorts of materials. It wouldn't be much different than the kind of application that they would submit to get into a college, university, or graduate school.
Right. In a sense, we've accepted you. Now let's get down to the reality of things. Let's take it to a deeper level.
Right, right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you want to avoid the simple things, I think, sometimes, like when did you graduate from college? And sometimes there, even the appearance of it, because people are always looking at a resume and going, oh, let me see when they, oh, so they're this old.
Right.
And while maybe it hasn't caused anyone a problem, if we really think about it, if somebody kind of got twisted out of shape a little bit, they could make an issue out of something like that or feed it to somebody else who may very well make it into an issue. And when you get as old as me, I know my friends are always talking about the idea, man, I'm sure I'm getting discriminated against because of my age.
Right.
So it's almost like sometimes we're looking for a reason to potentially pick a fight, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Another area that sometimes can be a concern, particularly where in the CPE world, is are you a U.S. citizen? And we, again, not something to ask, and probably the job application will have already asked something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But really what we care about is, are you eligible? Are you available to work in the United States?
Yeah. And
And then maybe what your status is, because some of those things have limited lifetimes to them. And so it's like, we need to at least know that if you come in, your status is enough to get you through to the end.
Well, we're in a political climate now too, where I'm sure that most people who are not U.S. citizens are going to be asking really important questions about those kinds of things. So we have lots of resources here in our national office to be able to support people with sorting out those issues.
Another area oftentimes that can come into play would be the idea of physical disabilities. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them obviously are very much apparent. And it's like, well, okay, I really don't need to ask because I can tell. But those disabilities are protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And again, be the kind of thing that you don't ask and don't discuss until after you've made an offer. And then the requirement really is that you need to make, and this is really subject to interpretation, reasonable accommodation.
Yeah. I think the place where that is most difficult is in questions around mental health and behavioral health, and those are also covered within the ADA. So for folks who come in with needing special accommodations related to those programs, need to be drawing on the resources of their HR department to be able to provide appropriate support and make sure that folks have what they need to be able to do this work.
So those are some ideas, some topic areas in a sense that we need to stay away from, and some examples perhaps of how we might deal with some of those things differently. Again, if we really keep the interview behaviorally focused, related to the skills and experience that somebody needs to be successful, for the most part, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And if things do wander a little bit, as quickly as you can, bring them back to job-related concerns. So
I think the other area of questions that I've heard some folks use too, related to behavioral questions that can be very helpful, is to some scenarios. So to offer to someone, your phone rings, you answer the phone, you've learned that there's just been a death on such and such floor. You don't know any of the details. Tell me the things that you do or that you'd be thinking about as you go into that. That's great, especially in terms of staff chaplain positions, but it can also be helpful for a student to hear what are the concerns you would have right away? What are the kinds of questions you would want to ask? What are the things you feel like you need to know? That also can give an educator a sense of where are the places we need to work. So you're already beginning to build an educational syllabus, if you will, as a part of that educational process.
mm-hmm.
I think the key in this is we don't want anybody to be afraid or to feel like somebody's out to get them. But we also realize that we are in a very different context than when this work started in 1967 and 1925, and that there are some things that people need to pay attention to as they do this work going forward. So thank you for taking time. We'll continue to update and do more of these kinds of things as we go forward, but we're grateful for your work. If you have any follow-up questions, you can email Richard at richard@thorneconsulting.com. That's Thorne with an E, or me, Trace, at acpe.edu. Thanks very much.
Thank you.